So this is what our ribbing looks like. You can see here I've made this hat with our cable stitch, and the ribbing is knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, and that's the pattern that you get. It's really pretty, you know, that's ribbing. It gives you a bit of a tighter kind of a fabric, and it's great on hats, the borders of a jersey, of anything that you make like that. That's what your ribbon looks like. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this, and this is pretty easy as long as you know how to knit and purl. So once you've mastered those two, you can do this simply, and there are a lot of variations to this. You can do 2 knit, 2 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl. You can alternate however, 1 knit, 5 purl. You know, there's so much you can do with that. So let me go ahead and show you how to do that. So to do your ribbing, you would generally, after you've got your stitches cast on, you would start with your ribbing, but I'm just starting in the middle of my work. But what you're wanting to do is you're going to start by, depending on your pattern, we're just going to go with knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. Now I don't have even stitches on here, so I'm going to show you both ways ending yours as to how you start on the other side. A lot of people have problems with this stitch in the sense of what do they start with and what do they end with. So I'm going to cover that with you so you don't have any problems. But you're going to start off with a knit, or you could start with a purl, but generally you start with a knit and then you purl 1. Now if you watch carefully, you'll see what I'm doing with my yarn. Remember I said when you knit, your yarn must be this side. So to knit, yarn is that side, and then you knit 1. Now we've got to purl 1. You've got to bring your yarn this side of your work before you can purl. Now you purl 1. Now it's knit, so guess what? I'm going to take this back. And this is very important. If you don't have that right, you're not going to get the right thing. Purl, yarn this side. And that's the hardest part, is remembering to turn your yarn to the side that you need it on. Now purl, bring it back this side. And there you are starting to rib. Now let me do another row and I'll show you what your stitches look like. Your very first row is a little bit harder to tell what stitch you've just done. So in other words, if you stop halfway now and you haven't put your yarn in the right position, it's like, which stitch am I on? Well, I can see which stitch is which. I'll show you now, but I'll show you later on too. There you can see that's a knit. It's like a V. There's your purl because it's got a little nub on it. Okay, there's your knit, and there's your purl. So if you put it down, you can see, as we do a little more, I'll show you more, it's a little easier. But just pull your stitch down and you can see that's definitely a knit stitch. That's definitely a purl, and that bump is right at the top of your stitch, right over here. So that's all that you do, knit 1, purl 1. And as I say, the hardest part is having your yarn in the right place. Purl 1 over here. And you just have to keep remembering, before you can knit, is your yarn in the right place. Purl. So this one is a little bit more, it's not as easy as just knitting, because you have to, there's a few more, there's another extra step, putting your yarn in the right place. So, you know, it's what you want. Alright, now that was a purl, this is a knit. Now, because you're finished with a knit stitch here, you're going to start with the opposite stitch when you start the new row. So that you need to remember. So it doesn't matter what you finish with, you've got to do the opposite. I finished with a knit, and I can see that's a knit, a purl, and a knit. Because I finished with a knit, I'm going to start with a purl on the next row. So I turn my work around, and now I'm going to start with a purl. So you would start with a purl. The other way is you can also look on this beginning, you can look on this beginning side, and you can see this is a knit here. You can see from here, there's a knit. There's a knit stitch over there. There's a purl. There's a knit, so this has to be a purl. Okay, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So I know this is a purl, and then this is a knit, and then a purl and a knit. Now what you have to realize is what you're doing on this side is the opposite to this side. So in other words, if I'm doing a knit here, it's actually a purl on this side. See that? That's a knit there, but it's actually a purl on this side. So this is a knit over here. It's a knit there, but on the other side it's actually a purl stitch. See that? There's a knit there, which means the opposite side it must be a purl. And that's what it is. So when you're turning around, don't let that confuse you. If you finish your row, okay, so say I finish my row here and I'm going to be finishing on a purl. So I finish my row here, I finish on a purl because I can see that's a purl. The other side I will start with a knit. I start with the opposite side, and that would make sense because I can see that that is a knit stitch there. So on the row that you're actually knitting, you're knitting the same stitch above the same stitch. So if that's a knit, I've got a knit there. But where people are getting confused is because when you turn it around, it's the opposite stitch. So that's really all there is to it. The work that you're working on, you do a knit stitch on the knit. You do a purl stitch above the purl. You do a knit stitch above the knit and a purl above the purl. And that's how easy it is. And as I say, what happens to it on the other side is it becomes the opposite. And that's all that there is to your ribbing. That's the greatest problem that people have, is just knowing to remember to put your yarn in the right position for whatever you are working on. The other thing is knowing that you're knitting it on the same side, and knit on the same, a purl on the same. And when you're turning around, you would be doing the opposite because it's the opposite on this side. And that's all that there is to it. And if you can't see, pull your stitches. I mean, you can see, you can pull them. Don't be scared to pull them. That's a knit. I can see there's no little bump like there is on the purl stitch there. And that's how you tell the difference between your knit and purl stitch. Alright, so now if you want to do your stitch slightly differently, and say you decide to do let's do 3 knit, 1, 2, 3 knits and 2 purls. Okay, so 3 knit, 1, 2, 3 knits and 2 purls. It's going to be the exact same concept. Okay, I can't get 3 knits on here, but we'll do the 2 to end with. Okay, so I finished now with 2 knits, so guess what? I've got to turn around and do purl. So I'm going to do 2 purls over here. 1, 2 purls, and then I've got my 3 knits, and I can see, sorry, 2 knits. Because it's the opposite. Those were the 2 purls. So now I do 2 knits here. 1, 2 knits, and then you've got your 3 purls. Because on that side they're actually the 3 knits. On this side they're the 3 knits, so you do 3 purls on this side. Okay, and that's what you would do there. Now I can see I got 2 knits here because those were the 2 purls I did there. So I do 2 knits. And I can see over here I've got 3 purls because those were 3 knits on that side. So you're doing the opposite on the other side. And that just gives you a different look. And it kind of looks like this. And that's what it looks like. It's going to be there with you. So you're going to have a thicker ribbed pattern over here. And you can, as I say, you can do this in so many different ways. You can do 2 purl, 1 knit, however the pattern is or whatever you want to design. That's up to you. And yeah, so that's how you do the rib stitch. Don't be confused with that. If you need to listen to this again. And yeah, so let's keep going. So let's change our yarn. I want to now change my yarn. How do I do it? Say you've run out of your red yarn and you want to put a new color in, or you want to use the same yarn. I'm going to do it with a different color because I want to show you something else. But all that you're going to do is you're going to take your yarn, that's the end part, and just fold it over. Okay, so you've got it looking like this. And you're going to take this piece. Now once again, everyone's got different ways of doing it. Whether you're purling or whether you're knitting, it's the same thing. if you're going to purl, you'd put it in this way. Put this over there. Okay, so you've got it like this. And then you're going to purl your stitch. I'll show you knitting as well. Drop this piece, and then this one that you had been using, I want to cross it over with my white. So there's different ways. I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible. I'm going to just cross this one. I'm going to cross them over. Okay, so that this, when I start my new yarn, I'm going to capture this piece here. Okay, so if your two yarns are like this, cross them over, and be sure you got the long piece that you're knitting with, not this little short one that gets sewn in. Okay, so take your yarns, cross the old one over, make sure your new one is under, just hold it down, and then you're going to knit, you're going to purl your next stitch, and that's caught it over there. It's just caught my yarn, so this isn't going to go anywhere now. I've gone very loosely here. Then what I do is I cross it over again, but this time with my new yarn. I cross it over again like that, and then I do the next stitch. And then my new yarn is secure. See this? So you're just trapping it in your stitches. So when you went to the other part, you're either going to do over. You want your new yarn to go over that one. So I will do this again. So there. You don't have to keep trapping it that far. I'm just doing it so you can see over there. And then you could do it again if you wanted to. Put this one over the top and this one under. And as long as you're trapping it, you see there, I've caught it there. There's my yarn. And I'm bringing this over. So I'm trapping that yarn. And then you're good to go. You can keep... Then you're good to go. You can keep knitting. You've just caught it in the back there. Okay, and it will be the same way when you do your knitted stitch. Alright, so if you're going to be doing your knit stitch, you're going to do it exactly the same way. Put this into your knitting position. Take your yarn like this and put your yarn over there. Bring it through and take it off. Get ready for your next stitch. That's the piece that needs to be sewn in, so this is a piece that I need. But here's my old yarn, so now I need to cross my old yarn over. So I'm going to grab this one so that this front one is over like that, and then I'm going to knit this in there. Okay, and then I can take it again. There's the old one, and I can flip it over. So there's the old one, and I can flip it over that one and bring this under. As long as you're catching it, you can see how your yarn is getting caught there. Okay, and then you are secure and you don't have any holes trying to form over here. And that's really all that you do there. If it was in the beginning, you would do the same thing in the beginning too. So if it's at the beginning of your row, you're going to just do the same thing with your yarn, and you're going to put your needle in there. You're going to wrap this around, bring it through, and pull all of these tight. They've just all gone a little bit. There's the end piece, and then you can do the same thing. I'm going to just wrap this around there and come over it, and then I'm going to just start knitting. And this one, once again, doesn't need to be done too many times, but you can bring it over again, and there you've caught your yarn. And that's all that you do. So that's how you change your yarn in purl, in knit, and at the beginning of your stitch. What I want to do is I want to show you how you're going to take your stitches off your needles without, say you've made a mistake and you've got to take it out. Instead of pulling everything out, I'm going to show you how to take your stitches off your needles without doing that. So I'm going to show you that in the next lesson.